So I'm working on a couple of laser videos, and as a part of that I need to make a bunch of these drawers. To enrich the story, this project is also made entirely from timber I saved from the rubbish. That's great because A, it's good to save stuff from landfill, and B, I get a bunch of free material. What's less great is that despite my best efforts, this reclaimed material is not perfectly flat, and this was very visible in the drawers I was making. I considered making a specific jig just for these drawers. That would have worked just fine, but I started umming and ahhing over that idea. I would prefer something I could use again, and the idea of a fixture table came to mind. My first thought was just to print a grid of hexagons and install nuts into them, but it took about a minute to realise that installing 800 nuts was not going to be practical or sensible. What came next can only be described as a flash of inspiration. I must have had a bolt laying in front of me, and the thought came to my mind: what if instead of threading into the board, the head of the bolt could be slid in instead? About 5 minutes of CAD and 10 minutes of printing later, I was left with my first prototype, which miraculously worked perfectly. The bolt slides quickly in place, but is still secured so that it can be tightened down. I'm still a bit in awe about how well this worked. Each unit is 15 by 15 millimeters. A work plate is made up of a grid of these units. Even for a small part, I would recommend a work plate of at least 30 by 30 centimeters, which is bigger than most people's printers. To remedy this, I made the system tileable infinitely. Connected with small bow ties, the tiles are designed to be screwed to a piece of wood or similar surface. I considered many possible systems with lots of fiddly connecting pieces, but ultimately decided it wasn't worth the hassle. Sometimes simple is best. Anyways, with those details out of the way, let's see how I made my personal board. The build begins this time with some printed and laser cut parts. First, however, I need to solve a problem of my own creation. Large parts like this need to be left to cool slowly before removing them from the build plate. I was excited and removed it as soon as the print finished, leading to the warping now present. To remedy this, I'm bolting it to this thick piece of plywood to tighten it down flat again, until it's set in place later. Next, I can take the laser cut elements and slot them in place. This shell then gets placed over the bed. Following this, we take 4 corner connectors and slot them over the plywood. These are then further secured with an M3 bolt that goes through the wood and into the plastic below. Next, we take the mid-joining brackets and secure them with another M3 bolt. To 2 of these, a handle and coupling nut is secured, followed by an 80mm M4 bolt to act as the support for the handles. The other 2 brackets just receive M4 bolts with no handle or coupling nut. Finally, a middle standoff is also bolted in place. Checking that everything is roughly where I want it, I can finish up the form with a round of superglue around the printed and wood parts. And with that dry, the form is now ready for, you guessed it, concrete. The concrete here is mostly just for mass. I prefer things that I can't bat around the table during use. It just makes the experience more pleasant. The concrete pour overall went way worse than it should have. I'm kind of embarrassed to show it. I was lazy and left in the large aggregate that I would usually sift out, and that ended up sticking up past the fill line. It was a pretty messy process to get a somewhat flat surface, but I managed it in the end. No mistakes, just happy little accidents. Despite that, I got a functional surface and left it to set overnight. The next day, I was gratified to see that the warping had been fixed. The tension in the PLA wasn't enough to warp the concrete it was now bolted to. Now with my work surface ready, I could prepare some work holding, and I made a pretty good variety. All pieces have a small chamfer to make sliding them onto the pins easier, and come in orientated and unorientated varieties. The oriented pieces have a rectangle embossed onto them, so they lock nicely at a mostly straight angle. But this also means they can only orientate one way. To make this clearer, they all have a small symbol on the top showing how to orient them. Rather than explaining myself twice, I think it's easier just to set up a gluing jig and show what all the parts do that way. Working top down, I begin with a corner and 3 straight blocks. That alone is almost half the support I need for these drawers. Under these, I clamp a piece of baking paper to keep glue off the board, even if it won't really stick to it. Using a drawer that's just been friction fit together, I can then start positioning the rest of the clamps and stops. The main clamps I use are very simple in their design. They're made up of a simple captured nut into which a bolt can be threaded. The bolt has a handle made with another captive nut, making for a simple but effective solution. These other stops are not good for applying force, but are useful for setting a repeatable position. After adding a few other pieces, the setup is done. It took a few minutes to put together, but for subsequent drawers, it's a matter of seconds to get them set up and ready to go. There were 2 parts I didn't end up really showing in the drawer setup. The first of these are the spacer blocks for supporting overhangs, of which there are currently 30 varieties. The other unused item is a toe clamp. Very simple construction and purpose. Overall, I'm really happy with this system. Thrilled even. It's cheap, dynamic, and easy to make, and I'm sure many people will find uses for it. I found this system far easier to use than clamping. The work is held firm, and unlike bar clamps, I can see exactly what's happening. With lots of small clamping points, I can adjust the force being applied very evenly. Seeing the walls fall into place was very satisfying. The files are linked in the description. The boards themselves are free and open source. However, I am asking a few bucks for the clamp varieties. Should be back to more consistent videos now. I feel like I say that every video, but I spent more time rebuilding much of my workshop storage again, but it's working much better now. Thank you to my patrons, and to you, as always, for watching.